As world leaders gather next week on World Environment Day in India to discuss the impact of plastic on the environment, this week's special assignment probes why, despite the introduction of the plastic bag levy in 2003, plastic waste remains a problem in South Africa. Where does our money go?
The plastic bag levy was introduced as part of other policies to be able to reduce the amount of litter in the environment that is caused by plastic bag waste.
Only 9% of plastic globally that gets recycled, and over 90% of plastic does not get recycled. They end up in the rivers, they end up in the oceans, they end up in the dump sites, and you see them decorating our land sites.
For customers like myself, this is where it all begins. This is where we get our plastic bags from, the supermarket. In 2003, the government introduced a levy on plastic bags, something that until then we had never paid for.
The plastic bag levy was introduced as part of other policies to be able to reduce the amount of litter in the environment that is caused by plastic bag waste. So the department responded by putting in place plastic bag regulations to be able to control the amount of plastic bag products that are put onto the market. It had an impact because now consumers have to think as well. The number of bags that were consumed came down because they are no longer freely available.
The money, we were told, would go towards cleaning up the environment through recycling, the collecting of waste, and reducing the number of bags we used. We got used to paying for bags, especially knowing the money was going towards the environment.
There was a resolution in the agreement to establish a company with the purpose of making sure that there are efficiencies with regard to the collection of plastic bags. The plastic bags can be recycled, and because there was an agreement with regard to making sure that the quality of the bags is improved, systems are put in place.
The company, a non-profit called Buyisa e-Bag, was wound down in 2011.
There were challenges that were faced by the company with regards to governance issues and performance linked to the purpose and the objectives that were envisaged when it started off.
Buyisa denies this, saying it was hamstrung by delayed departmental funds. The National Consumer Union alleges that there were also missing funds.
When the organisation by e-Bag folded, we were aware that some 90 million rand had been sunk into that project. No one has to this day explained to us where that money went to or what happened to it. We've asked the Department of Environment Affairs a number of times but have never received a response.
The department says all funds were accounted for and they have no knowledge of the alleged missing 90 million rand. Neither were they informed about it. I'm standing just outside of National Treasury. These are the people who allocate the money that we spend on plastic bags. I'm going to go and ask them, where is our money going?
The money flows into the National Revenue Fund. It's the same as any other revenue. And then it goes through the budget process. In the budget process, all budget bids are evaluated on the same criteria. And that's basically how they advance government's mandate of reducing unemployment, reducing poverty, and reducing inequality. So the difficulty for environmental programs in that case is that they come up against large programs such as health, basic education, social grants, and to get an allocation, they have to be able to show that they would be carrying out the same sort of mandate or have the same sort of impact on unemployment and inequality. You can't just look at the 12 cents and say this is a proportion of how much it costs to make the bag, because the key is also how much is it going to cost to clean up the bag afterwards.
Wait a minute. How much of the funds generated from the levy have been going towards the environment?
It's probably about 20 to 25%. The key thing is to step away from the earmarking, and that it's so that the revenue, the tax has its own rationale, and it's not a revenue rationale, it's a rationale about reducing use and putting a value on plastic bags.
I left Treasury wondering whether the levy, introduced as something to help the environment, had ended up as one more onerous tax on the consumer, which ultimately offers very little value to the environment. Because bags now have a value, recycling has seen the rise of a new financial sector. Waste pickers eke out a living picking recyclable materials from our garbage before municipal trucks clear it. Their recyclable waste is exchanged for cash at buyback centres. Today's garbage collection day in my area. I see there's a lot of waste recyclers out here. I'm going to offer one of them my plastics and see if he'll accept them. Hi. Okay. Do you take plastics?
Yeah.
And plastic bags?
Yeah.
And what do you do with them?
This one is take this one, put somewhere, scrap it.
In the scrapyard?
Yeah.
And do they pay you for it?
Pay money.
A lot? A little?
Don't money travel so big.
Only if it's a lot?
Yeah.
Patrick Makubele says depending on the weight of the recyclables he collects, he earns between 80 and 150 rand a day. The government does not give him incentives for diverting recyclable waste from landfills. Bags like these are available in most stores. They were introduced as a more durable option to plastic bags. They are mostly made of recycled materials and vary in cost depending on where you buy them. The South African National Consumer Union says initially when the levy was introduced, there was a drastic reduction in plastic bag consumption. But now, despite prices having crept up, most consumers just ignore the cost. They also say the prices of bags are not displayed, and as with each item that is available for purchase, the price should appear on the product or close to where it is kept, at till points. The plastics industry, represented by Plastics South Africa, says demand for plastic bags is close to where it was prior to when the levy was introduced.
Since the introduction of the plastic bag levy, we've seen a huge reduction. We also seen a number of companies closing down in that period. Over time, I think it becomes a grudge payment, and people continue to buy it because it is the best practical product that you can use to carry your groceries, and specifically if you use a taxi and things, it makes it more convenient.
But the Department of Environmental Affairs insists the levy has altered consumer behaviour by significantly reducing the amount of plastic bags used and resultantly plastic bag litter.
The amount of plastic bags that are part of the litter problems in the country has reduced drastically. In terms of the amount of the levy vis-a-vis the total cost, retail price of the bag, some retailers sell the bag at around 60 cents, but the levy portion of that retail price currently now sits at around 12 cents.
We pay between 50 and 70 cents a bag, and the levy makes up to a fifth of that amount. So where does the rest of our money go?
asked this Irish master whiskey distiller why sometimes whiskey is spelt with an E and sometimes without, he'd say,
"Oh, to be sure. You're fair so good, look. It's the whole thing. They're back and get off in the whiskey without the E."
Yeah, didn't catch that. But if you asked us the difference, we'd tell you that every whiskey from around the world is spelled without the E, except for Irish and American whiskies. Cheers. Tops at Spa. Good whiskey, good advice, no Irish accents.
Let's cross over live to Griselda Lewis, who is standing by at the arbitration hearings.
But I didn't think about it at the time that people could be dying.
Let's update your sports news.
Get all the dominating stories locally and globally on Newsroom every Monday to Friday from 9 a.m.
Ahead of World Environment Day, I look at the plastic bag levy introduced in 2003 to reduce plastic bag litter and question whether it has made an impact. We pay between 50 and 70 cents a bag. The levy makes up about a fifth of that. Something doesn't add up. I approached Pick n Pay and Checkers, the two biggest retail chains, to find out what profit they make on bags. They declined my request for an interview and respond in writing that they do not make a profit on plastic bags. I approached bag manufacturers and asked them how much profit they make on a plastic bag. They refused to speak to me except to say that the information is confidential. Treasury says that since its inception in 2003, the plastic bag levy has generated 1.9 billion rand. About 20 to 25% of that amount has gone towards the environment, but the total monies collected from the sale of plastic bags over the same period is more than 5 times that. Plastic is made from plastic pellets like these. They do not break down naturally. So Plastic SA encourages recycling, which has to adhere to certain conditions.
Plastics is a byproduct from let's say, if you use the South African process, we use coal, and plastics is a byproduct in producing fuel, for example, petrol or diesel. So that is then used to produce the plastic pellets. So it's going through a process where it's melted and cut into pellets. And that pellet is then converted into the different products that we use. Oxo-biodegradable is a big no-no for the industry. The reason for that is that it fragments into smaller pieces. It's a heavy metal additive that's been added to that, so it doesn't biodegrade, it fragments. So at the end of the day, we will walk in small pieces of plastic dust.
Manufacturers were adding calcium carbonate to the plastic bag mix. That made them unrecyclable.
It's a natural filler that we've introduced. It's like talc. And it's been used because the price of the calcium carbonate is much less than that of virgin plastic material. As soon as the industry have picked up the problem, we created a working group with the whole value chain involved. So the retailers was present, manufacturers of bags, recyclers was present. And the focus was really, how do we change this around?
The industry says it promotes responsible use and disposal of all plastic products.
We're not producing our products to end up in the environment in the ocean. We would like to see that the products has been reused. It can be used over and over again. So let's bring it back. Let's reduce our dependency on fossil fuel and make sure we produce new products with a longer life that will keep on serving us. We promote it. We believe in the product. We believe that it adds value to everyday life. With that does come the responsibility of everybody in terms of the environment and the impact of our products in the environment. If you take a cotton bag that you use as a grocery bag, you need to use that more than 131 times to offset the carbon footprint of one plastic bag. Cotton needs to be grown, there's pesticides, you need to work the land, you need to clean it up, you need to harvest it, you need to process it. All of that requires energy, requires water. If you compare those sort of things, then plastics remain a very good product.
Several countries are moving towards controlling plastic bag consumption.
It is expected that the polythene carrier bags will be withdrawn from all retail outlets.
Over 20 African countries have already either banned the use of plastic bags or have placed levies and restrictions on them. Many countries throughout the world have also introduced levies and minimum requirements for plastic bags. If plastic bags were to be banned in South Africa, as they were in Kenya, Rwanda and other African countries, how would the plastics industry be affected?
It will definitely be devastating. You'll see a lot of companies close down, people losing jobs. One has to look at why those countries have banned plastic or plastic bags. I recently visited Kenya and they don't have infrastructure in terms of recycling. So there's no proper collection of waste, there's no separation, there's no recycling facilities. So it is an easier way to stop some of the pollution going forward.
At the CSIR, Dr. Muniyasamy and his team have partnered with the Department of Environmental Affairs to develop a plastic bag that is 100% organic.
What technology we developed, it degrades in within 3 to 6 months. It degrades within 3 to 6 months, and it can degrade in landfill condition, and it can degrade in compost condition, as well as it can degrade in marine water. That's the advantage of this technology.
There are some drawbacks, like the cost of the bags being more expensive than regular plastic bags, but that's because they haven't gone into mass production yet.
This materials comes from the renewable plant source material. So, if, for example, if the recycling, if you mix this biodegradable material and compostable material, the existing petroleum paste with when for recycling, it will contaminate. So, it should be segregate nicely. But the biodegradable technology and the compostable plastic is still 100% recyclable. But it should not be mixed with together when you do recycling. It should be properly labeled. So it's biodegradable, 100% biodegradable, and 100% compostable, and also is 100% recyclable with a separate recycling system.
They are planning to roll out a pilot phase in some stores later this year.
This is your midday report. Good afternoon.
I will be free.
I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya.
Let's take a look at how African markets and currencies are performing now.
The central bankers say the success of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is just a bubble.
Breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune into Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
Hello, I'm Simpiwe Ngongwane, and as usual, I'm in the company of the pearl of the show. And yes, I'm Pearl Shongwe, and this is the weekend edition of Morning Live,
where we bring you news stories making headlines, weather updates, and the latest in the world of sports.
Every weekend on Saturday and Sunday mornings, we bring you, our viewer, vibrant, exciting, informative current stories here on the SABC News Channel 404.
And we also put a spotlight on creative art stories, book reviews, poetry, and various topical stories. We also bring you live outside broadcast as well as live music performances.
All of this every weekend between 6 and 9
here on the SABC News Channel 404.
These are the hazards of plastic bags, and all too often this is where they end up. That means they go into our river systems and into our dams and sometimes into the oceans, polluting as they go along. And many of them are not biodegradable. And it's in overcrowded places where people live close together that you see some of the worst pollution, like here in Alex. I meet Nhlanhla SABC from Greenpeace Africa by the river in Alexandra, Johannesburg.
What we see here, unfortunately, it's a very polluted river, and as we know, the Yexke has been actually like this for a number of years, and a lot of plastics, a lot of different types of garbage that actually gets washed from the different suburbs that we have here, including Alex, the township that we're in. During your rainy seasons, you find that all of these plastic bags and all kinds of paper get washed into the river. And it's also when it's not rainy season, unfortunately, you find that there are people who literally actually throw their garbage into such rivers.
Greenpeace says animals are actually choking to death on plastic. Every minute, the equivalent of a truckload of plastic enters our oceans.
In the instance of the marine life, we see quite a lot of marine life that has actually ingested plastics. You actually see becoming into tiny particles, and that's what the smaller fish ingest. And this feeds into this vicious cycle of our own food chain, because we do eat fish, right? And the fish that we are eating, in turn, we're eating the very plastics that we actually are throwing into our rivers and into the oceans. There's quite a lot of examples where you find that when you go to your local supermarket, you find that each and every item is wrapped up in its own plastic. And that plastic, it's just for the sake of wrapping. When you get home, you're going to take this plastic and you're going to discard it and put it in your garbage bag.
We recycle about 10% of our plastic waste. The rest of it gets buried in landfills, which are running out of space.
If you go to your favorite restaurant, and for some reason you decide that you want to take away your food, they're going to offer you probably a straw. They're going to offer you, which is plastic. They're going to offer you a cutlery, which is plastic. They're definitely going to offer you the foam packets. And then to top it off, then they're going to give you that carry bag, which is plastic. So why don't you take it back? In terms of telling them that, listen, do I really need all of this plastic? Because I'm just going to use it now when I get home and when I eat all of my food. But all of this plastic, I need to throw it away. So we need to put pressure as citizens, and individuals. We need to put pressure on these retailers, who in turn, I'd like to believe that, and this is what we strongly believe, that in turn, even your retailers, your supermarkets, will speak to the manufacturers and say that, we really need to find other innovative ways in which we can package our food.
Because of their size, small pieces of plastics and plastic granules in cosmetics are amongst the worst form of plastic pollution in our oceans.
There's always this claim that whenever you find any type of plastics that are being manufactured by whomever, they always want to lay the claim that it's biodegradable. The thing is that you take those plastics and you put it in a lab, and you'll discover that in most cases they are actually made with petroleum products, and those are the plastics that takes thousands of years to actually, to even biodegrade at all.
Given the sheer volume of plastic waste and the fact that it will take thousands of years to break down, where are we headed?
One of the weaknesses of the South African policy is that we see a lack of proper implementation. The implementation of policies like, the clean-up, it's things that don't happen. And unfortunately, sometimes it only happens in certain areas, and in certain areas, it does not happen. So I would say that from government side, they need to find a way of which they can actually make sure that the policies are properly implemented. Because it only does not speak to the pollution of plastics, but it just speaks to pollution in general.
Will we have to get used to living amongst plastic debris?
We just need material that we can use at least for as long as is possible, not your single-use plastics, not plastics that once you throw it out there, it's going to take a couple of thousand years to biodegrade. It's the mindset that should inform us that we move away from this kind of plastic where the claim is that we can always recycle. There is something that is terribly wrong that we are doing as individuals, as industry, to our environment. We have a moral duty actually to preserve every kind of life that exists on this planet.